last left off, we were on chapter 2, and Mr. and Mrs. Bricker had just been punished by Socks for him falling off of Mrs. Bricker's lap because her lap was getting smaller because her belly was getting bigger. And then at the end of that page, she said, Mr. Bricker said, "It is time to go." And he said, "Are you sure?" And this is where we're coming right back. Because I'm positive, said Mrs. Bricker in a small, scared voice. This is it. With great dignity, Socks stalked to the one piece of furniture forbidden him, the chair with the loopy upholstery. He placed his forepaws on the chair, arched his back, and pulled. Oh, rip, rip, rip. There. The Brickers gave Socks attention, but not in the way that he expected. He found himself snatched at, carried down the hall, and tossed into the dark laundry beside his pan of kitty litter. The door shut after him. "Sorry, old boy," said Mr. Bricker as he gave the door an extra push to make sure it was latched. After a moment of shocked silence, Socks let out a yowl of rage and waited for release. He could hear the Brickers talking in quick, anxious voices. He could hear the whir, whir, whir of the telephone dial, but he did not hear anyone coming down the hall to let him out. Socks meowed his loudest, crossest meow. Footsteps hurried, the front door slammed. Out on the driveway, the old station wagon started, died, started again, and drove away. The house was silent. So was Socks. After months of catnip and kidney, of service and attention, to be treated like this. In the days that followed, Mr. Bricker dumped food into Socks' dish early in the morning before he left the house, and again at night when he returned. But in between, Socks was alone. He waited on the windowsill. He slept. He honed his claws on the forbidden chair, although the sport was gone. The ringing of the telephone made him anxious when no one was home to answer. The buzzing of the doorbell frightened him, so that he hid under the bed. But he need not have bothered now. No one came to open the door. Socks lost interest in food. His ping-pong ball no longer amused him. Without love, he was bewildered and dejected. Then late one morning, Socks was roused from a doze by the slam of the station wagon door on the driveway and the sound of the voices of both his owners. Oh, with glad meows, he sprang from the couch. As soon as the door opened, Socks was outside, his forepaws against Mrs. Bricker's thigh, stretching up to be petted. A light breeze ruffled his fur, and spring sunshine drew the fragrance from the lemon blossoms. Life was good again. "Did you miss me, Socks?" Mrs. Bricker stooped to rub the hollow behind his ears, where his gray fur grew short and fine. "Were you lonesome without me?" she asked. Socks' throat pulsated with purrs. He rubbed against her legs, back and forth, round and round, as she entered the house. He could not get enough petting to satisfy his pent-up loneliness. "I missed you too," said Mrs. Bricker in such an understanding voice that Socks felt he must take advantage of her. With a hopeful meow, he started toward the kitchen, paused, and looked back to encourage her to follow him to the refrigerator. Until that moment, he had been so happy to see his family that he had not noticed the bundle in Mr. Bricker's arms. Socks hesitated, which means he waited. Which was more important, a tidbit from the refrigerator or his right to investigate everything that came into the house? Curiosity won, and he turned back. "See what we've brought?" said Mr. Bricker. A smacking noise came from inside the bundle. Instantly, Socks was alert. There was something alive in there. His spine prickled as he paused to sniff cautiously. Mrs. Bricker folded back the blanket, and Mr. Bricker leaned over so Socks could see. He saw a creature with a small, wrinkled, furless face, a sight that made his hair stand on end. His eyes grew large, and he backed away. Whatever the thing was, he did not trust it. As Socks stared at the strange creature in the bundle and listened to it smack and snuffle, he began to understand. His owners, his faithful, loving owners had brought home a new pet to threaten his position in the household. Socks turned his back and lashed his swollen tail. He was filled with jealousy and anger and a terrible anxiety. The Brickers might love the new pet more than they loved him. Poor Socks. Mrs. Bricker stooped to smooth his fur, but Socks moved away from her hand. An unhappy wail came from the bundle. "Oh dear, he can't be hungry already." The worry in Mrs. Bricker's voice was a new sound to Socks. "He sure can," said Mr. Bricker, as he sat down on the couch with the wailing bundle on the lap that had always belonged to Socks. "Listen to him. You can tell he has a fine pair of lungs." Socks turned his back and began washing to pass the time until he made up his mind how to regain the lap from the new pet. On her way to the kitchen, Mrs. Bricker spoke in her usual voice, higher than her normal voice that she had always used for her cat. "I'm hurrying," she said. "I'll have your bottle in a minute." Socks paused in his washing with one paw behind his ear until he understood that this time she was not speaking to him. A slight that hurt him almost as much as the loss of the lap. He scrubbed his back paw back and forth across his nose until he could contain his longing for reassurance no longer. Alert and ready at the run at first sight of danger, Socks crept cautiously towards Mr. Bricker, who reached for the bottle his wife had brought from the kitchen and said, "Let me feed him. You sit down and rest." Mrs. Bricker sat down, but she did not rest. "Are you sure you know how to feed him?" she asked. Both parents spoke of the baby as if it were a stranger whose name they had not caught. "Nothing to it," Mr. Bricker offered the bottle to his son. Greedy smacks came from the bundle. "Hey, look at him go," said the proud new father. Socks took a chance. He leapt to the center of the couch, cautiously set one paw on Mr. Bricker's knee, leaned forward, and sniffed a sweet, milky fragrance. "Careful, Socks," warned Mr. Bricker. "You can look, but don't come too close." Socks stared at the tiny, wrinkly face with a mixture of fear, curiosity, and jealousy. So, that's the new pet. And that's where we're going to stop for now. See you next time.